Today on the podcast, we have Steve Wild, CEO and founder of LifeSport Health Clubs. He has a great story about how he got started in music, took 32 years off, and then this is a great tidbit at the end, talks about how finding something of energy from your youth really invigorated his business and his outlook on the world and life. It's a really great conversation. Let's jump right into it. The Leadership Superpowered podcast is brought to you by Caxy Interactive, a custom software development company focused on helping mid-market companies achieve enterprise value through creating custom software that optimizes their business, creates huge leaps in customer experience, and widens their moat of differentiation in the market. Well, Steve Wild, welcome to the podcast. Steve is the founder and CEO of LifeSport. They have a bunch of locations here in Chicago. And you're another one of my guests on my experiment, learning about people who have music in their background and how they brought it to their business life. And you just started telling me this great story about your origin story about music, and I made you cut it off so you could tell it again. It's had a surprise twist I did not see coming. So dial us back and talk about how you came into music and kind of the events that led you to put it down for 30 years.
Well, it's actually an interesting story because I grew up in the city of Chicago, and we all remember when the Beatles came, and everybody was just fell in love with music, and everybody wanted to be in a band, and in those days, it wasn't like only a certain type of demographic played music. You had jocks playing music, you had the hipsters playing music. It was everybody just played, And so I played in bands from the time of seventh grade through ninth grade. And then, in that time, we like a lot of families, we moved to the suburbs. And, I went from this little parochial grammar school on the north side of the city with 30 kids in the class to 1,000 in my freshman class at Maine West. And so I played in the band for the first year. And then, so I was coming back from band practice. It was actually June 25th, 1970. And I'm riding through Park Ridge on my Schwinn varsity, and I'm just flying through this intersection. Boom, I get nailed. And it was just kind of an interesting situation for me because I thought, I'm a little weirded out by where music is going right now. Maybe I just need to go a different direction. I'll put the guitar down. And didn't touch it for 32 years. Wow. And then my daughter was a professional tennis player in a former life. She played the tour from 1987 to 2000. She was like top 20 in the world, and played all the big events. And so we'd be in Europe or Asia, and the internet was starting to become available. So eBay was just emerging.
Yeah, sure.
So I would surf around eBay. I thought, I just wonder if I can find my old guitar, my old amplifier.
And what was your old guitar? And what was your rig? What'd you have your setup there?
Well, here was the deal. My first guitar was a Silvertone guitar. It was the Silvertone guitar with the amp in the case.
Oh.
And what we did was I couldn't play chords as well as the other guy in the band. So what we did was we put bass strings on this Silvertone.
Oh, really?
and that was my first bass guitar, or doctored up bass guitar. Okay. And then about a year later, my mom saved a lot of dough and went to Biasco Music in the city on Belmont.
I remember that.
And I got a 66 Gibson EBO in maroon and or burgundy. And so that was my first real bass. And then, the guys that had the really cool stuff, they had the EBO, and then they had the Fender Bassman.
Yeah.
Well, Fender Bassman was like $400 at the time, so that was a little bit out of my price range. So I had the Silvertone Bass Amp 35. So that was like that was the next best thing.
Okay.
So, but again, as kids, we would take the L downtown and we go to on the music stores on Wabash Avenue, Frank's Drum Shop and Baldwin Music, and you'd see these big customs amplifiers, the tuck and roll with the sparkle,
yeah.
And then the Hofner bass. I remember Hofner bass was $350 at the time, And so, and then the other thing we'd do is we'd hang out at the local music store, We used to hang out on Continental Music. It was I think it was like Bryn Mawr and Kimball,
Hmm.
something like that. And you'd sort of hang out there, and the good guys would come and play, and you'd just kind of your jaw would drop watching them play a lick that was famous at the
Yeah.
time. For me, it was the test of any bass player was could they play the bass line to Hey Joe.
Okay.
And so that was really
Moving a little bit
really your
walking. Yeah.
test of whether you were the real deal.
Oh, that's great.
And so, but again, you'd see these, at Continental Music, they had these big, beautiful amplifiers and stuff, and you just oogle and stuff
Yeah.
and hang out, and it was, it was that. So that's the background. So fast forward, I'm in high school, and I get hit by a car coming back from band practice. I don't touch a guitar for 32 years. My daughter's last few years in the tour, I get this urge,
Yeah.
that I'd like to collect this stuff. I don't necessarily want to play, but I want to collect this stuff.
Yeah.
And so I started to collect a little bit, and then my kids got me some guitar lessons. And I thought, you know what? I played bass as a kid. Let me play
Yeah.
guitar because I can't just hang around playing
Sure.
bass. I mean that's kind of there's no fun to that. So so I started taking guitar lessons, and then I had the guitar teacher at my house, and my wife pops her head in, and she says, Renee is going to have a 65th birthday party for Bob, who was a lifelong mentor of mine and been looking out after me since I was 17.
Yeah.
And maybe you could do some live music. And so I said, well, excuse me, if I switch back to bass, I'm sure I could do it. So so I went to I get my guitar teacher who played rhythm guitar, and then I went to the bass player at church. I said, "Hey, do you know anybody that knows some '60s, rock?"
Sure. Sure.
And so he introduced me to a friend of Woody Johnson's, and so Woody has really been my partner in crime with the class of '68,
Right.
and without him, there wouldn't be a class of '68 because he was plugged into the music scene the whole
Okay.
the whole
Okay.
time.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, Woody, look, I just want to form a band for, one night. We're going to play like 6 or 7 songs and what we'll call it a day. So I got my son-in-law to play keyboards, and the guitar teacher had a drummer. And so we put this thing together, got in a little practice studio, and I go, oh man, this is great. I love this.
Yeah.
Well, long story made short is I fell in love with it after one sort of half of a set in
Bug.
in
Yeah.
2002, and then it hasn't stopped since. So
Great. Well,
that's
so
that's
tie a
kind of
few things
my
together
that's
for
kind of
me.
my
So,
story. It's
so,
it
so tell me so about the business. I don't know if it's a chicken or egg, which came first. So it sounds like maybe were you your daughter's coach and traveling with her? Like where did you cross
was
over to
you
open the
know
company up?
So what happened was, I never, the interesting thing is I look back on my life. If someone would have told me when I was younger that I'd be doing what I'm doing, it wouldn't have been out of the realm of reasonability, or it wouldn't have shocked
Yeah.
me. But it's not anything. It was nothing I ever planned to do.
Sure. Sure.
And so I was concerned that in this big high school that I may not get a letter in football or basketball. So I go, well, hey, I'll play tennis. I think I can do that, right? So again, another interesting story. I just fell in love with tennis, and just got so into it that. I earned a scholarship to DePaul University, and then when I graduated from school, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and found out that I had a real skill for teaching kids,
Okay.
developing young tennis players, and then built a tennis school out of that. And then from that, I built one club, and then eventually it became 4 clubs, and that's just kind of the way things evolved. But music was never, for 32 years, it was just gone.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, Joe Contafio had this band called Jade 50s. And in the 1980s, I sort of serendipitously happened on to him playing at a bar one night.
Hmm.
And, I used to follow Jade all the time. And I would just sit there and I'd watch Joe, and I go, there was something in me that just kind of, just really resonated with, and thinking, boy, I could do this, and never ever had any plan to do it. And interestingly enough, when I was taking guitar lessons, my teacher said, do you think you'd ever want to play in a band? I go, Absolutely not. I got way too many things going on. I own these clubs. My daughter's playing tennis. There's absolutely no
Yeah.
way, And so it's funny how things happen.
Yeah. So one of the things I've been talking to people about kind of who have music in their background is, you have a really interesting story having been in it as a younger person, then coming back when you're a little bit older. Is there anything about like the dynamic of, being in a band or, about, recommitting yourself, taking lessons that you look at your business life and say like, I wonder if there's something I pulled in from the music side of my world.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'll tell you, huge. Well, first of all, the thing that I really enjoy, I love the energy of playing in a band, and there's just something about it that just we can play a gig and I have a sort of a high for the
Oh, for
next
sure.
week. I mean, I just love doing it. Um, but the interesting thing was, marketing is. And digital marketing is really one of it has revolutionized the business world.
Yeah.
And in my business, because my I own four tennis and fitness clubs. Two are in the north part of Illinois, so Kenosha, Libertyville, and Lincolnshire. Then I own two just over the state line in Kenosha and Racine. And being in a large metropolitan area, traditional forms of marketing. I should say that I went to DePaul University on a tennis scholarship. Got a degree in. I started off as an accounting
Oh,
major,
okay.
and that got too boring, and finished in marketing. But then years later, I went back to the Kellogg Business School, and so marketing is a really big part of Kellogg. It's one of their
Mhm.
strengths, and so tennis clubs or fitness clubs in a large metropolitan area don't have the same access. The scalability makes traditional forms of marketing kind of out of reach. In other words, we're not going to put commercials on TV.
Yeah.
We're not going to do billboards. We're not going to do all those types of things. So you say, well, how do you do this? And when I started in the business, the yellow pages were the biggest form of
Mhm.
the most effective form of advertising, and then a little bit of direct mail. Well, we know what's happened with that over time.
Yeah.
So what I found with the band is digital marketing and Facebook in particular with the demographic for our band
Yeah.
is absolutely critical. So it's launched me into the whole digital marketing
Mhm.
realm. And so now, post pandemic, we're looking at developing a digital marketing model, for the clubs, and we'll be going pretty much exclusively with digital marketing. So that's a carryover
Yeah.
from the music world to the business world. And again, absent the band, I'm not even sure I'd be on Facebook. But
Right. Right.
anybody that follows me on Facebook knows that I get all sorts of interesting stuff. I have my grandkids and the
Yeah.
band and what have you. So I'm a bit of a Facebook junkie.
Well, that's great because you're right. I mean, in a digital marketing age, I think one of the key things that I hear a lot about in our business is that there's so much noise. Like there's just, you get a million messages, and I'm curious for you, having been, having grown these businesses, you've been to Kellogg and been through some of their training. What if anything, what's worked for you from cutting through the noise and finding your market and digital market?
Well, again, the reality is that one of the things I learned at the Kellogg Business School is that when you spend $1 million on marketing, the only thing you really know is you spend $1 million on marketing. So I mean, that's just that's the reality.
Yeah.
But what I will say, and again, we really pulled back during the pandemic because with limited resources, it makes no sense to put a lot of money into any kind of marketing because as soon as the next wave of the pandemic would come up, it was like we were shut down.
Yeah.
We were put through some mitigations. So I mean so the sort of the private club business, that whole space has probably lost 3 years of selling seasons.
Oh yeah.
Generally, January is the big selling season, and even Planet Fitness. did not pull any of their marketing money back this last January, and they just did not have the effectiveness that they normally do, because of the pandemic. So if you've got limited resources, we haven't done a whole.
Yeah.
You're not going to do a whole lot. We haven't done much. But what I will tell you is that I think the beauty of digital marketing is you can spend the smart dime instead of the dumb dollar,
Yeah.
because you've got instant feedback. You know how many clicks, who the clientele are, who the people are
Yeah.
that you're actually sending the message to, and the degree to which it's resonating. So I mean, it's a whole new world that I think is terribly exciting, that I would not have really gotten conversant with
Hmm.
absent
Yeah.
my activity with the band.
Well, you touched on something that's been a hot topic on other interviews I've had, which is sort of how people found a way to get through the pandemic. And some businesses adapt pretty well to it. Like, our business is a software business, and literally everyone could go home the next day and it was kind of the same business. Whereas you kind of have to go to the club to be at the club, I think. And with music, we didn't play a gig for 2 years because there was nowhere to go. I'm curious, like, what did you guys
Yeah.
do with 4 locations and four leases and all that kind of overhead? How'd you get through it? Like, what worked?
Well, we were very fortunate because, a big part of our business is still tennis.
Hmm.
And tennis is, each tennis court is 6,500 square feet
Oh, okay.
with a 40-foot ceiling.
Yeah.
So it really is the functional equivalent of being outside.
Okay.
So the tennis aspect of our business did very, very well. The fitness side, is
Right.
still not back to pre-pandemic levels, but our total revenues are actually have exceeded pre-pandemic levels. So
Interesting.
so so in 2008, we didn't fare quite as well as we did in 2020. So again,
Hmm.
sometimes you get these black swan events,
Yeah.
and you just don't know how the business is going to respond.
Yeah. So did your mix change to more tennis or charging more for tennis?
Absolutely, absolutely. And then with certain amounts of the remediation for the various waves, they would say, okay, well, you can't have more than X amount of people on a court,
Yeah.
right? So then we'd have to switch from group lessons to private lessons.
Yeah. Interesting. And did you find the guidance to be relevant to you? Because I know some people, when they would, come up with some sort of guidance about what remediations were in place, it would work for some businesses, but not for others. Whereas I think, as you're saying, tennis is kind of an ideal sport. Like, in a way, like for racket sports, racquetball would probably be the worst because you're in a fishbowl with somebody.
Right,
But,
right,
outside,
right.
it seems like it kind of lends itself well to the new world that we're in, I guess.
Well, I was very fortunate because I have been in sort of a Vistage equivalent for owners of
Yeah.
privately owned recreation facilities,
Hmm.
since the early 90s. And so the interesting thing for us was that we had feedback from all over the country. And so I knew what was happening with PPP activity on the East Coast, the West Coast. And so, being able to, and we would be on these conference calls once a week comparing notes. And so that was very helpful. And then originally, my partner in our Wisconsin clubs was a guy named Alan Schwartz, who owns all of the Midtown clubs.
Hmm.
Uh, and so his son Steve now runs the business day to day. And Steve did a masterful job of coalescing all of the private clubs together to form something called the Illinois Fitness Alliance,
Huh.
and that gave us a voice in Springfield, and also sort of built a conduit into the decision making in Springfield. So Gail Landers, of the Fitness Formula Clubs, was also very instrumental in that. But those guys together just did a really, really great job of making sure that in a situation like this, our voice was heard, because oftentimes lawmakers have no idea what kind of impact their decisions will have. And then by us being able to educate them and being involved in the decision making process, it just it helps things immeasurably. And again, everybody can bemoan the fact of the lockdowns and
Yeah.
everything else. And again, I've got my own opinions about that. but I think things could have been a hell of a lot worse in the state of Illinois had we not had our fitness alliance, and that's really Steve and Gail
Oh,
Anderson.
that's great, and I feel like it's funny. I have a group, a similar group, and actually two groups like that. One really industry focused, and one a little bit broader. And partnerships are a lot of how I know our business got through that. And you're not alone. I feel like I've heard a similar story, and that people looking to kind of share knowledge and share pathways through an idea. That's been a success story. I think I've heard a number of times over. It's really good to hear.
Great, yeah, yeah, it was invaluable.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, just maybe as a final thought here, your music path, kind of with that big break in the middle, is really intriguing to me. I know it's funny. I took a break for about 3 years because I was done with music, and it was really frustrating. And my wife actually came to me one time and said, I think you should probably pick this thing up again. I think you're getting a little jumpier. You were happier when you were doing that. Did you notice, like, what about like you have a real smile on your face when you talk about the class of '68 stuff? It kind of is a final thought on what has music brought back into your life that you were
that's an excellent point, because Jim Lair now works in the area of corporate performance and human performance, and he started off in the tennis world, and as a sports psychologist, studying motivation and success and attitudes that you need. And a few years ago, he wrote a book called The Power of Full Engagement. And I'm using this as an example because, it wasn't because of reading the book that I did this. It's just that in my life, I've always tried to move to where I felt at equilibrium.
Okay.
And where my activity was releasing energy in me, right? And so, that was the whole thing with tennis. And but after a lifetime of it, it starts to become the same old, same old.
Yeah.
And the point that Jim made in the book is that, particularly with mid-career executives, the monotony can sort of creep in, and then you're not nearly as effective as you once were, because you don't have that enthusiasm, that energy that you really need. And the interesting thing about the aging process is you start to get a little complacent, and yes, you've got the knowledge, but you don't have the piss and vinegar to actually make anything happen. Right?
Sure. Yeah.
So in a roundabout way, Jim's point in the book was, go back to something that you did as a child, and recapture that enthusiasm, that energy that you had in some other field of endeavor.
I love
that. He gave the example of a guy that was mid-career business guy, and just getting bored. And so what he loved to do was coach basketball. So he went back and he coached his kids' basketball team, and that just lit a fire under the guy.
Yeah.
And that energy carried through into the more significant areas of life. So for me, I've always had various things that I've been involved with, and I've always moved towards the area where it would release the most energy. But again, you get to a certain point, you got to pay the bills, you got responsibilities, everything else. So for me, I would say that the class of ` and playing this music that I grew up with as a kid. First of all, it's all high energy stuff.
Sure,
class of '68 is a high energy sort of dance band from the 1960s. So it's Beatles, it's Rolling Stones, it's Motown. It's just stuff that just you want to get up and move to. And so it's released that passion and energy for me, because now the other part of my life is that I developed my daughter as a world-class tennis professional. Now I'm doing the same thing with my grandkids. My youngest grandson was the number one in the country last year, and then the boys 12s. So now I find myself schlepping around to junior tennis tournaments all over the country with them. And again, it could get real old and real monotonous But I bring my guitar with me, and I'm able to to play when the kids are asleep, and it releases a lot of energy in me.
That's really great. Well, that was a real zinger to end on. I appreciate that story. I think I'm gonna go get that book. I feel like I know that name, and so that may be something.
Jim Lair, yeah,
Yeah.
he worked with this guy Jack Groppel,
Yeah.
and together that they formed a partnership, and now they're really doing a lot of corporate performance. So again, it's that energy that you have to have in order to be successful at anything.
Yeah. Well, this is great. Thanks for being on today, and love to do it again sometime.
Be great. I enjoyed it.
Thanks. Thanks for listening all the way to the end. I know you can't like and subscribe to every podcast that you listen to, but if you do it for just one this week, I hope it's mine.